It cannot be denied, Enlightened Strike and Command & Conquer are some of the most efficient staples in the game. Enlightened Strike on the one hand gives you the choice between a card draw, +2 attack, or go again, while Command & Conquer on hit will destroy the opponent's arsenal. So while building a deck, usually you end up in a situation where you have like 4 or 5 slots left where you can add some toolbox cards, and most of the time it's either Enlightened Strike or Command & Conquer taking these slots. There are many cards I would love to play in my decks but rarely have the space for, but when used properly these could be highly competitive alternatives for Command & Conquer and E-Strike. So if you're a newer player that is not yet ready to pay the steep price for these two staples, let's go over some must-have alternatives that you could include in your deck instead. Scar for a Scar is a very efficient attack. It deals 4 damage, it costs 0, and it even gains go again if your life total is lower than the opponent. This card is perfect if you're going to play an aggro deck, and is actually very efficient if you compare it to something like Enlightened Strike. While Enlightened Strike is able to have 5 damage and go again by itself, it does require you to put a card on the bottom of your deck. A card like this, it's 4 damage, it probably has go again anyways, and it doesn't cost you a card, which means that you can likely swing with some other card right after this one. Snatch is yet another example of a very efficient play. Again, it's 4 damage, it costs 0, and on hit it can draw your card. It's very cool if you can combine this together with something like a Snapdragon Scaleless, or even throwing something like a Razor Reflex onto this, pushing it to 7 damage into that very awkward damage range and probably hitting and getting you a card draw straight away. Exude Confidence is another card that makes it very difficult for the opponent to use instance and defense reactions because they need to block this card with a card that is equal or greater attack. Since this card is attacking in for 4 already, that means that they need to commit quite some resources in order to stop an attack like this, especially since you can pitch 3 resources in order to boost the attack by 2 at a time. So if you play this early on and you have a means of giving this go again, it puts your opponent in a very awkward spot where they may not be sure if they should go all in blocking this or letting it all through, and it also gives you the flexibility to decide after that if you want to pitch a bunch of cards in order to increase the damage of this card, or if you just want to leave it as is and just block out instance and defense reactions for the rest of the combat chain. Rally the Rearguard is a very nice card. It's 6 power, it only costs 2 resources, and it has a built-in defense instant, almost like a defense reaction that allows you to discard a card to give it +3. This is very good if you're up against an opponent where you are not really sure if they have an attack reaction ready. You just block with the Rally the Rearguard. Then if they do use an attack reaction, you can always discard a card to get that +3 effect card instead. Nourishing Emptiness is a bit of a more expensive card in this list since it's already sitting around the $10 mark. However, Nourishing Emptiness is one of those cards that I personally feel is really underestimated. What this card does is if you have no attack actions in your graveyard, it gains Dominate and +1 Intellect on hit until the end of turn. So this is perfect if you have it on turn 1 where there is nothing in your graveyard yet or your chain is still going. You can simply attack in with it. It probably forces your opponent to block with all the equipment, which means that you don't really need to worry about that in later turns. And if they somehow let this dominated hit through, then that means that you've dealt some early damage and you also get that +1 card at the end of the turn, which is absolutely magnificent. Finally, there's also Flock of the Featherwalkers. This is a 5 attack that also grants you a Quicken token if you attack in with it. A Quicken token pretty much gives your next attack go again. This is quite useful if you have a big attack, something like a Nourishing Emptiness from earlier, and the next turn you can simply play it on top of the Quicken token, the Nourishing will gain go again, and then you can continue to swing in with your other cards. Personally, I think all these cards that I've mentioned here today are likely some of the best alternatives for Command & Conquer and Enlightened Strike. Alright, and that will conclude the video. It was a nice and short video, but I think that these alternatives will really hit the mark. Personally, I quite like Exude Confidence and Nourishing Emptiness. Of course, these are the more expensive ones of the slot since they are Majestics themselves, but I think they are just absolutely magnificent cards that are really underplayed right now in the metagame. So give those a shot if you can, but the other ones are also perfectly fine. If you want to support the channel, there are many ways to do it. You could like the video, subscribe, you could leave a comment down in the description, or you could subscribe to my Patreon, which will help me to sustain the channel financially. Either way, I hope you will help me out and I will continue on helping you out with all these Flesh and Blood videos. Thank you for watching and I will see you all soon.